Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and did you know that I ordered the TFC construction robots in 3 pairs over a few months? The third member of the team that I messed with was the awesomely monikered Dr. Crank. This vehicle mode's basically a stick on wheels, carrying a giant crane. What lifts it up is the sparse but poppy colorwork on the front and rear, with a lot of little lights and windows clearly picked out. I also like the touch of the translucent red upper windows. The main attraction's the crane, and it's hefty. There's a neat piston action when you raise it, heavy detents in the axle, and a segmented extension feature. It also attaches via the same connection as X-Graver's shovel, and has the same bevy of uniform pegs and ports that you've, hopefully, come to expect from Team Hercules at this point. So the play options are a bit grander than I first thought once I tried mixing and matching accessories. I think Dr. Crank's been involved in an abortion, because he has an aborted gimmick all throughout this crane. Allow me to explain. Number one, this is a weird place for this piece of the crane to be located at. Like, it's next to the part it's usually hanging off of. And it's got these weird little rings inside. Basically, they correspond really well to the two jostly little rings here, and even the one up here. All this stuff looks like it was meant to have a string, or even a couple strings, running around through it to have an actual, proper crane gimmick, but it's not there. So that's kind of weird, and this is all corroborated by this little thing. This weird, somewhat meaningless-looking little purple peg. It's actually got a square hole on the other side, and is keyed to fit right onto this square peg, which turns this crank that, if you look over here, has a little hole in it that a string could have been wound into and tied within. And the final nail on this little coffin is that there's a cut divot in here that fits this purple thing, so you can turn it and stuff, but then you can also push it in and lock it, as though if this were suspending, say, this thing holding up a weight, that would prevent the thread from unspooling any farther than you want it to. So all that's there, and then, I mean, these things, I don't even, whatever. The one last remnant of that gimmick are these pegs. Basically, if you fold out all 4 pegs, and by fold out, I mean fold out the front 2, and then get some kind of tool out to get this rear one out, because this is a dingleberry of a peg. It's unpleasant, it's unsocial, and you gotta do it twice. Hooray. These were some hotly debated pegs back when this guy came out, but I buy into the theory that these are meant to represent the kind of like feet that would fold down and then balance the crane against the ground such that its tires wouldn't pop from the enormous weight of what it might be picking up with its arm. So all that put together means that all we really need now is a string from which to dangle this thing, and a huge amount of patience, as people who have tried to do this mod have said, at least from last year or so when I was reading about it, that running a thread through here and everything and whatnot, it's a lot of work, and it's really haphazard. I believe some people said that they found it was better to drill a few holes in along the way to keep kind of running track for the string to stay straight through, otherwise it would fall off to the side and get all messy. So all the stuff is here to set up a string gimmick, it's just not actually been implemented. I'm going to guess that not actually getting factory workers to put all that crazy stuff through here saved a whole lot of money in production. So it's interesting that it's here. It's just kind of a bummer because it's like, I think it's a cool looking gimmick, I just don't want to do the work. I'm lazy. What can I say? What could have been a stupid simple transformation is still kind of a stupid simple transformation. Dr. Crank's got Structor's ludicrously stiff giant heel platforms attached to a simple leg flip, and after folding 2 wheels back and performing a slightly interesting multi-swiveling arm unfold, he's pretty much done. Like Structor, he's simple. Unlike Structor, it is pretty boring to transform this guy. The good doctor's got decent-looking robot mode proportions, saddled with the mother of all backpacks. It's the length of his body with the upside of really helping him stay upright. Dr. Crank's best feature is easily his face sculpt, which is loaded with character, but unable to use its light piping unless you turn it sideways a bit, due to the pillar behind his head. The crane arm can be removed and used in a huge number of ways, be it wielded or mounted. If you're actually interested in playing with your TFC construction men outside of combining them, this does redeem Dr. Crank somewhat, as he makes good use of their shared 5mm gimmick. It's pretty fun, but removing the crane also really highlights just how much Dr. Crank's center mass has made sacrifices for the sake of the combine mode. The Doctor can crank, but can he groove? Kind of. His head can turn left and right. Can't really ball joint around because it's sort of fused in place due to being a key component of the transformation. His ears, pretty much, are a key component. His arms are on a simple swivel with a simple hinge, with a simple swivel and a simple, and now classic, single joint on the elbow that's kind of a double joint but results in having no actual elbow. Big weird chunk missing from his arm. There's no real limitations here except that his arms can't rotate backwards too easily because they start banging against the gigantic rucksack. He's got no waist because he is basically a head and some limbs bolted onto this big-ass mess of kludge. His hips are a universal joint, and since he's got this big tripod thing, thus allowing him to be completely incapable of ever falling down, ever, the ratchet in his hips, instead of going forward and backwards, the ratchet is on the outward side-to-side motion, so he doesn't splits out too easily. So that's a cool touch. It's a neat little bit of intelligence there in the design. His knees, they bend here, but since they don't really lock in, they might just end up bending here. This is technically a double joint, but bending here looks way awful. So I kind of wish this would just click into place and we'd just live with maybe a single hinge there, this or something, some kind of detent to hold that better in place rather than randomly going all weird and kneecapless. And that's about it for his posability. He's not superposable. He's not a brick, but he's all limbs, baby. Dr. Crank's all about subtle poses, standing around looking menacing or having a big thing sticking off of him. He's no acrobat, and I don't feel that I totally mind, but I very much wish he had a waist joint of some kind just to have that the basic six, you know, neck, shoulder, hip, waist. But he doesn't. However, he is still able to do some stuff, and at the end of the day, he is also still the Doctor. This guy is hard to look at on his own, because so much of both of his modes have been compromised for the sake of combination. His vehicle mode's okay, and his robot mode's passable, but both are extremely uninspiring if you don't take full advantage of the 5mm peg and port play pattern. He's very parallel to Structor, but in a far more negative light. You're definitely not buying Dr. Crank for Dr. Crank alone. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and every doctor's gotta have a patient, right? Let me recall the story of a man named John.